Has anybody ever said that to you when you had gone out to ask people to leave the street before?
No.
Okay. Now, beyond words, did you actually see something happen that was something you had not seen before when you were to go out and ask people to leave?
No. With the tone of the voice, I can tell that they was extremely pissed off at that point.
Did they do something after that that made you even more frightened?
Mr. Wright started running towards me at that point in time.
Yep, and now because we want to take it step by step, this is very important. When he started stepping towards you, can you remember where he started?
He was right here beside the door.
And you were still near that white box in front of the car?
I was right in front of the car, about the front end of this box here.
And it's your recollection Mr. Wright took steps towards you?
He started running towards me, I backed up.
He started running towards you then? He wasn't walking?
He was not walking. He seemed very serious, very, very serious.
What was running through your mind when you saw Mr. Wright running towards you after hearing the things that he had said?
I feared for my life, totally. I was scared.
Was that the first time you'd ever felt that way in this type of a situation?
Yes.
All right, so this was completely new.
Yes.
All right, and you said you feared for your life. What were you afraid of him doing to you?
After he said that if I don't get back in the house, he was going to kill my ass, I thought that he's going to kill me with his gun, my gun, or a knife, or with the medical problem that I have with the injury, I was afraid of him taking my weapon.
Do you believe you would be able to resist him if he had attempted to take your weapon from you? Like you would have been able to stop him from taking that gun?
Oh no, I would not have been.
All right, because of that, as these thoughts are racing through your head, can you tell the jury how much time you had between the time that Mr. Wright began to run towards you, you began to feel this way, and you were able to react? How much time are we talking about here? Are we talking a minute, a few seconds? What are we talking about?
I am not sure. When he started running towards me, I backed up a few steps. I pulled my weapon. By this time, he stops a little bit. You know, I rejected and fired. He turns.
After you fired, he turned? Is that the order of how it happened?
Pretty close, Rhett.
We're talking about a split second.
Yes,
Okay.
split second.
You pulled your weapon and aimed it at him. What was your intention when you pulled your weapon and aimed it at him?
Well, I thought he was right there on the end of the barrel, but when I pulled it, he stopped, and he started going backwards. And I didn't have any bullet in the chamber. I rejected the chamber. The bullet went into the firing spot, and I fired it.
Okay. All in the span of less than a second?
I would say less than a second.
Okay.
Everything just happened so fast.
When you fired the weapon, were you still frightened that either he or the woman there was going to assault you, injure you, or even kill you?
Yes, definitely. I wasn't even sure that I had hit him. I was off balance when the gun fired, and the gun wouldn't fire anymore. It's an automatic. I still had the trigger. It fired, and it wouldn't fire anymore, and the slide was half back.
So after you fired the one round, did you see whether that first shot struck Mr. Wright?
At that point in time, I seen him run and got between the two vehicles. Mrs. Roger ran and got into the passenger side vehicle.
All right. The passenger side, not the driver's side.
The passenger side.
Was the passenger side door open?
Yes. All right.
Before she got in, or did she open it? Do you remember?
When I came out, the door was open. Mrs. Rogers was right here. When the shot was fired, Mrs. Rogers ran this way. Mr. Wright, from about he was here at this point in time when I pulled my gun. He was right about here when I fired. He ran in here.
Were you able to see what he was doing when he ran into that location?
No, no.
What were you afraid of what he was doing when he ran into that location? What were your concerns?
At that time, the adrenaline was up. My gun had jammed. Still aiming, still facing this way. I turned to face that way. I got the gun unjammed, and I went this way.
Okay.
He didn't come out.
He being Mr. Wright.
Mr. Wright.
Still between the two vehicles.
He's still between the two
Ms.
vehicles.
Rogers, at this point, she's in the gold car.
She's in the gold car.
All right, when you got over by the passenger side open door of the gold car, what was running through your mind? Were you still frightened?
Yes, I was still frightened.
Okay, what were you frightened of? I mean, what did you think could possibly happen to you at that point?
Get shot in the back.
Okay, so were you afraid that if you turned and ran towards your home at that point, you would be fired upon?
Yes.
And so when you got over by the passenger side door of the gold car, what happened next?
When I came around to the came around here, I was focusing on both of them. When I came around here, I noticed that she was sitting in the passenger side seat, and she had her hand extended out, and I heard a click.
You said you heard a noise?
Yes.
Did that noise frighten you?
Yes.
Okay, now, the moment you heard that noise, what was your response?
I shot into the car.
Do you know how many times you fired into the car?
It's an automatic. I couldn't keep up with the shots. I know it was more than twice.
So, are you saying then that you heard a noise, you were still in fear, so you responded by just pointing into the car and firing?
This is a very serious matter, and the jury needs to be able to hear. I would appreciate if the child who is being exposed to this might be removed from the court if you could.
Thank you. Okay, so I believe I was asking, after you heard this noise, you fired into the passenger side door of the gold car towards where you believe she was.
Yes.
Were you able to see what was happening as you were firing? Are we talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, something very rapidly?
Everything was happening so quick. I'm trying to watch him. I'm trying to deal with her. I fired into the car, you know.
What happened after you fired into the car, whatever number of times, did you then turn your attention to where you believe Mr. Wright was?
Yes.
All right. Prior to that moment when you fired into the car, where Ms. Rogers was, had you ever, at any point prior to that, aimed your weapon at her or fired your weapon towards her?
No.
Only after you got towards that door, the
Yes.
first time you fired towards her?
Yes.
And only after you felt something was happening that frightened you for your life?
I felt that when she was pointing at me, it was a gun, and I fired.
Right. Do you know it was? I mean, you look back in your mind, it's been a number of months, you look back in your mind, you look in there, do you know that it was?
I had 8 months to think about this, and the trees there in my yard was fully covered with leaves. It was totally dark here. I barely could see her in the car, but I felt 90%, 98% that it was a gun that she had.
So your response, by firing into that car, do you believe even today that that was your only available response? Like that's what you had to do to protect yourself?
When I heard the click, I started shooting.
After then firing the rounds into the gold vehicle, you turn your attention to where you believe Mr. Wright was?
Yes.
At that point, did you discharge any more rounds towards where Mr. Wright was between the two cars?
Yes, I did. Mr. Wright, I heard him moving around in here. This area here, I heard him. There's a tree somewhere over in here. When I got in the viewing area, you know, he was extending his arm at me also. I couldn't really see totally 100%, but 98, 95%, he was aiming at me, and I shot more than 2 times at him.
In that direction between the two cars?
Yes, I did.
Whereabouts were you standing when those rounds were fired? Do you know? If you can recall.
This is the the driver front door. I was directly from that, maybe 16, 18 feet away, and his position, I was probably 20 feet away, 22. I was a little bit further from where I was with her.
At that point, after you had fired the rounds into the gold car and you fired them towards where Mr. Wright was located, did you feel you were safe at that point? Before you fired at Mr. Wright, did you feel you could leave without putting yourself at risk?
I ran.
I'm talking about before you fired at Mr. Wright the second time. Okay, not after, before. So you fired your rounds into the vehicle, and then you fired the rounds into Mr. Wright.
I didn't know when I shot him, I shot here. I didn't know that bullet hit him.
Or whether it did at all, right? I mean,
right,
you don't know.
exactly. I thought I totally missed him, and I probably did miss him totally.
And so, did you feel in your mind that after firing the rounds into the gold car, that you could not safely leave that location?
No, sir.
Were you in fear for your life?
Yes. They both said we. I didn't know who all that we meant.
Did you see anybody else in that immediate area of those two cars at any point during this incident?
No.
All right. You heard some testimony from Kawan Sanderfield that he was in the car, he jumped out and ran. Did you ever see that?
No.
Did you ever see him at all?
No.
No, okay, we'll get to that in a second. So you fired the rounds towards Mr. Wright, a number of rounds, more than 2, you said?
Yes.
At that point, what did you do?
I ran like a scared rabbit.
Okay, where did you run to?
Right in the back of my house, the same door I came out of.
Okay. Now when you went back, let's get this out of the way here right now. Do you believe that the shots you fired at Luana Rogers and Sharon Wright caused their death?
I do believe that I hit them. Yes, I do believe that it caused their death. Yes,
you don't dispute that?
No, sir, I do not.
Now, to ask you this though, knowing what you know today, if you were to go back in that exact same situation, would you do it again?
Sir, I would have to do exactly the same thing. Exactly.
Because that was a response to the feelings that you had to what was happening around you.
Yes.
And you feel there's no other way you could respond other than how you responded.
I was fighting for my life.
Mr. Emory, I were to tell you that you may be confronted or there's going to be some evidence coming up at some point